I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today, How to Improve Youth Financial Literacy. My name is Chris Warren, contributing writer at Banking Dive's Studio ID, and I'll be the host and moderator for the webinar. Today we're going to take a deep dive into a topic that is of undeniable importance to parents, educators, and young people themselves. That's financial literacy. Unfortunately, it's already clear that the vast majority of young people are not learning the skills needed to responsibly manage their personal finances. In many ways, this is not at all surprising. As a rule, schools simply don't incorporate critical lessons about saving for college, understanding good and bad debt, budgeting, and many other skills young people will need to lead successful lives. According to a study of 15-year-old students conducted by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, young people lack many of the basic skills necessary to manage, save, and invest money that are necessary as adults. The study tested the understanding of basic financial concepts and practices like planning and managing finances, risk and reward, and the application of those concepts to education and work, home and family, and society. Out of a maximum possible score of 1,000, the average American 15-year-old scored 506. That lack of financial literacy translates into nearly 50% of teens not knowing what a 401k is, 32% not able to pinpoint the difference between a credit and debit card, and nearly 3/4 of teens not feeling confident about their financial education. The real-life implications of not having sufficient financial skills are not just conjecture either. The negative consequences can be seen in how adults handle or mishandle money. For example, the National Consumer Financial Literacy Survey found that fewer than 1 in 5 adults are confident in their saving habits. Only 2 in 5 adults keep a budget and track their spending, and 61% of people live paycheck to paycheck. Fortunately, there's also growing evidence about the effectiveness of continuous financial literacy education targeted at young people. A recent study conducted by the University of Massachusetts Donahue Institute found that 90% of the 20,000 middle and high school students who completed a financial education course saw a meaningful increase in knowledge gain afterwards. Because teachers are being asked to do more and more, some financial institutions have taken it upon themselves to create and deliver education aimed at improving young people's financial literacy, and some have had remarkable success with their efforts. Take, for example, the multi-pronged education initiatives by Citizens aimed at children from kindergarten through high school. For instance, within the College-Bound Citizens program, students take part in the Pathways Financing Higher Education digital course, which seeks to demystify college financing and help both students and parents understand realistic approaches to covering the cost of higher education. We're going to delve into youth financial literacy topics today and hear directly from Citizens about its experiences. But before we get into all of those interesting topics, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the presentation. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right-hand corner of your presentation window. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation using the Q&A widget. We'll try to answer these during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know that we do capture all questions. Finally, following the presentation, you'll be able to access the on-demand recording of the webinar using the same link from today's live event. Now I'd like to introduce today's speakers. With us today is Dr. Dan Zapp, Senior Director, Research and Evaluation at EverFi. Dan received a PhD in applied developmental psychology with a focus on the intersection of cognitive and social and emotional growth. Over the past decade on EverFi's research team, Dan has helped construct learning and interventions for children, adolescents, and adults, while measuring the impact of those courses through learner surveys and assessments. Dan's work utilizes data collected through EverFi's instruments, which both show the impact and efficacy of courses and also generate insights about the development of critical concepts for parents, teachers, learners, and other stakeholders. Also with us today is Reza Agmirazadeh, who is Executive Vice President and Head of Community Development at Citizens. Reza has spent his career leading teams to achieve successful and measurable objectives within community development, community lending, community investments, corporate citizenship, public affairs, and sales. Reza's work with his team at Citizens has made a big impact in the communities the bank serves, including billions of dollars in loans and investments through the Citizens Community Development Group to support the development and rehabilitation of affordable housing and economic revitalization. Financial literacy courses for young people is part of Citizens' work engaging and supporting communities. Finally, we're joined by Mindy Hager, Senior Vice President, Student Lending Sales Leader at Citizens. Mindy has spent her career helping families pay for college. Both at small startups and large financial institutions, Mindy has worked to give families and students the knowledge and tools they need to navigate the complicated and often intimidating universe of college applications and financial aid forms. A big part of that is education, and we're fortunate to have Mindy here to talk today about how Citizens has developed and implemented courses and resources that help students understand the cost of higher education and find the resources to pay for it. Well, Dan, we're going to start with you. In my introduction, I talked a little bit about a study that showed just how effective financial literacy education is for young people. But as I understand it, that hasn't always been an accepted fact. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about why we can confidently say that financial education can be impactful.
Sure, and thanks so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I got into this field about 10 years ago, and from the moment that I started studying financial literacy education, there has been a controversy in the academic literature and in the business sector as well, of really contentious about whether this type of education works or not. And some people had very strong opinions that it was not useful in any way, and others were very clear that this was the thing that could fix the biggest economic problems that we had. And if you look actually at the research, neither of them could have possibly been right at that point. So the biggest piece of evidence for me is the meta-analysis that was done by the National Bureau of Economic Research that looked at 76 different randomized experiments studying financial literacy education courses and their downstream behaviors, and that included over 160,000 different individuals who were included in those experiments. And if you look at the landscape of research on this type of education, there really wasn't enough evidence even to make a decision until we get to about 2015. And from there, you see it shoot up. And there's a huge increase in the number of studies and the size of those studies that go into really rigorously evaluating financial literacy education programs. I think for a long time, we had a very broad and varying definition of what financial literacy education was. And so when you have a very broad definition, you're sort of testing different things and you're comparing apples and oranges, really. I think that now that we've gotten more refined about what we want to teach and what we want individuals to learn, it becomes very clear that when you teach those concepts in a very specific way to get very specific outcomes, the research is overwhelmingly positive that it does work, that it not only increases what students know, which is great, being able to answer questions, but also how they feel, how they think, how they perceive the world, and then their actual behaviors as well. And that's the end goal, right? We want to get down to changing behaviors. It's not enough just to know that you should do something. Like, I know I should go to the gym. I don't, but it's engaging in those behaviors as well. And so I would say that the debate now is over about whether or not it works. Now we need to move on to how do we make it better? How do we make it work for everyone? Who does it work best for? And how can we improve the overall impact of these types of programs?
Right. That's great. Well, so I think we can safely say then that that's good news, that this has been settled and that these sort of efforts can have a meaningful impact. So I want to dig in a little bit more about some of the data and measurement work that you do, and we're gonna get to how the course's citizens launch were measured in just a bit. But first, I want you to walk us through how you actually measure how courses are working and the value that data brings in assessing the instruction that is done.
Absolutely. Excellent. I want to take one step back, though, real fast, though, and note that saying that data is important and even collecting the data is the easiest part of doing this type of research. You can collect all the data that you want, but if you never really look at it, if you never really glean the insights from it, then it's less than valuable. And saying that we are data-driven or we are research-driven is a really easy thing to say. I just said it right now, and it took no effort at all. But being data-driven, being research-driven is actually really difficult. And that takes testing your hypotheses, challenging your ideas about what works and what doesn't, and putting those through rigorous research that oftentimes will surprise you in what you find. And so it's important that you collect a lot of data from these individuals. We don't just want to know about, so we collect survey data about their attitudes and their behaviors, and we collect assessment data about what they know and what they don't know, like getting questions right or wrong in terms of personal financial capability. But we also want to know about their experiences through the program. We want to know about implementation. We want to know about, hey, does this course work better if we give it in a week or we spread it out over a month? We want to know about usage. Our students, how many students are getting through this? How many students are stopping halfway through? Are they getting stuck somewhere? Are they getting bored somewhere? And then finally, the thing that we're looking at now is, yes, data is critical to collect, but how can we collect that in a way that doesn't negatively impact the learner experience? There was a time where we were collecting here at EverFi 500,000 responses from surveys from our students. You don't need that much data. There is no statistical test, almost no statistical test, that needs a sample size that large. So what we're looking into now is how do we selectively get the data that we need in a way that is as convenient as possible and doesn't hurt the user experience at all.
Right. Well, yeah, it is easy to say data-driven, and we all hear it probably every day. And it's good to get a sense of what that actually means. Let's dig in a little bit more. I want you to walk us through, what it actually looks like if you're going about measuring the impact of a specific course. Take me through that journey from your perspective.
Of course. And what this really starts with is it has to start very early on in the product development process, right? Research can't be tacked on at the end where you build something and then you say, all right, measure this and tell me if it works or not. What's it supposed to do? We have to start from the very beginning with clear objectives. What do we want these learners to think? What do we want them to know? What do we want them to feel? And what do we want them to do? And let's list those things out specifically at the outset. Then we can design the content to focus on those outcomes, and I can design the measurements to try to gauge whether or not we've gotten there or not. So where we really start are with the learning objectives for the course. What do we want people to do in response to this? What do we want them to think and feel? What are their changes in their KAB, their knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors? And so we want to collect data on all of those things. So what I'll get is a list of learning objectives from the product development team that says, this is what I want this course to do. And I say, great, I'm going to measure that it does those things, and I'll set up the measurement plan for that. And usually that'll involve a series of combination of surveys and assessments. So what we'll generally do is we'll have assessments that surround lessons. Like there'll be a lesson on a specific topic, like budgeting. And before they get into that lesson, we'll give them a pre-assessment which measures what's their baseline, where are they starting at with what they know. Then they'll go through the content, and then after they're done with the content, we can give them a longer and more complex post-assessment to see what they've gained, so we can see the difference. What did they know before compared to what they know now? So then we get, and those are two clean measurements outside of that lesson. So that's how we can get like knowledge gain in the course. But we also bookend the course experience at the very beginning and the very end with attitudinal and behavioral surveys. That's where we want to ask things about like their personal experiences. How do they feel about managing money? Things like their self-confidence or self-efficacy. How well do you think you could overcome an obstacle if it came your way? And how do you feel, how normative do you think it is for people your age to engage in this behavior? Many of these behaviors, if we don't, as humans, we spend a lot of our lives sort of like looking around and checking what other people are doing. And so our perceptions of what's normal and what's abnormal influence what we're likely to do and what we're not likely to do. And so what I'll do is I'll collect all of that data through the surveys that students give us, through the assessments that they take, and match that up with their usage in the platform. How far did they get? How long did it take them to come out with their impact profile at the end? And then I can get their changes in knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. And we really do believe that it kind of works in that order, that you have to change what someone knows about a subject in an engaging way, in such a way that it crystallizes and sticks with them. And then once that sticks with them, over time, that new knowledge can change the way you look at things, the way you feel about things, your perceptions of the world, your ability to recognize opportunities, and the ability to recognize when you can utilize resources. And only then, after that, will we see behavior change. Only then, when you have an opportunity to make a different behavioral decision, can we see a person make that decision. So we don't think it happens all at once. We think it happens over time. And the research we're collecting really supports that. But it also, we're finding that if we're measuring these, if we're providing this instruction correctly, and we're measuring it rigorously, we're seeing very positive and consistent, sustained results.
Great. Well, Dan, this is really helpful, and I think you just laid a really critical foundation for where we're headed next. And we're gonna move into learning a bit about citizens and the work that they've done and the experience they've had working with educators and communities to provide financial literacy instruction for young people. There's some examples of that here. Citizens in EverFi have collaborated on 3 educational outreach efforts. One is the College-Bound Citizens Program, which teaches the Pathways Financing Higher Education digital course, and that's focusing on providing students and families with access to the information they need to make informed financial decisions about their future. The Citizens Smart Start program teaches a course called Money Moves, Modern Banking and Identity Theft Protection. And that's seeks to equip students with knowledge and skills they need to be savvy and safe when using mobile and online banking technology. And then a third program is the Citizens Early Readers Word Force program. And that helps young children build a love of reading and improve their grammar and sentence building skills. And so while that one isn't specific to financial literacy, it's important to develop early literacy skills to set kids up for future success. We're going to talk mostly about the College-Bound Citizens program and have Mindy walk us through it. But before we talk about what Citizens has learned through those efforts, I'd like to get Reza to speak about the role he sees financial institutions like Citizens playing in promoting youth financial literacy. Reza, if you could just talk us about that perspective from Citizens' point of view.
Thank you, Chris. I think the place to start is to acknowledge just how important basic money management skills are to the future success of young people. Exposing young students to easy steps for savings, budgeting, and using credit builds a critical foundation that will help them well into the future. Some of the statistics you mentioned in the introduction about the difficulty many adult Americans have with saving, investing, managing money is a good reminder that more work needs to be done when people are young to provide the financial skill everyone needs to be successful. The logical question is then, why isn't this necessary education taking place? There are many factors that contribute, and the reality is that there is a mixed picture around the country in terms of financial literacy education. In many states, financial literacy is not part of the standard curriculum in schools. However, some states are now requiring this as a factor to graduate, which is a step in the right direction. It is true that schools should make learning about finances a priority for students and provide resources to parents to encourage those conversations at home as well. But it's also important to acknowledge everything that educators are already tasked with these days. Being a teacher over the past 2 years has been incredibly stressful and overwhelming. Making it easy for teachers to provide financial literacy instruction is an absolute necessity. One way to do that is to provide access to programming and lessons planned that are easy to follow and proven to be successful. That's where financial institutions like Citizens can really play an important role. We understand we can be a vital resource in our communities to support this effort and ensure young people have the necessary skills to make informed decisions about their finances that will impact them for years to come. At Citizens, we utilize our network of community ambassadors. These are colleagues across our footprint who are trained to deliver financial literacy curriculum to partners. Having our colleagues go out to locations also helps overcome a barrier of coming into a bank branch, which may be intimidating for some. It is also true that enlisting expertise of Citizens employees to give back to their communities is rewarding to the employees who do it. Volunteering to help young people expand their understanding of money management skills has a very positive impact on our colleagues. We know this is a key driver of employee satisfaction, and we're proud to create opportunities for colleagues to give back to their communities. One last point is important to make because it relates to the two programs we're discussing today. There's the financial education component, which is about knowing about budgeting, knowing about appropriate money management. That is what's taught within Citizens Smart Start program. Then there are the tactical aspects of how do I pay for college? You can be incredibly financially educated, have a budget, and still not know anything about how to apply for college financial aid or how to get student loans. That's why a program like College Bound Citizens is so important.
That's great. Thank you so much. And it's also a perfect segue to bring Mindy into the conversation and to talk about the Pathways program. Mindy, I want you to talk about the origins of that program, but before you do, I'd love it if you could describe a bit more about your background, which I hinted at in your introduction to the webinar. As I understand it, you financed your own college and graduate school, so you've lived the topic. Can you talk a bit about where your career has taken you from financing your education to now helping others do it?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thanks for having me, and love to tell these stories because it truly is my passion around helping students get to college. So I was first generation student. I ended up, filling out the FAFSA myself. Had very little help in to do that. So when I graduated college, I actually started my career as a financial aid administrator. Started as a counselor and then climbed up to be a director of financial aid and spent about 8 years there. And I wanted to be able to have a process that I could give to students that was better than what I had. And that was even at 22. I knew something was wrong with how I was getting information and wanted to make sure that we could help that. So spent the 8 years there and then transitioned over to the lending side. Have spent about 20 years on the lending side and the last 4, almost 5 with Citizens. So I want to go back quickly to something that Reza said about the distinction between foundational financial literacy and the information with pathways. And I think, for first-generation families, again, I fell into that. You have those that have no knowledge about how to complete the FAFSA, no knowledge about how to pay for college. But I will say I talk to families who have gone through the college process, who have, parents, maybe lawyers, maybe doctors, maybe MBAs, and they are still confused about this. And when the student gets admitted to, their dream school, all rationality tends to go out the window, and they end up thinking, we don't know how to do this. We have no idea what this needs to do, and how we need to pay for it. So there really is this kind of emotional piece that goes to it, and really understanding the pieces of the puzzle. As we look at, all of the data, there are parents that have a lot of shame around not saving enough. And even those who think, you would think that are economically advantaged, maybe having a lot of anxiety and shame around the fact that they didn't save, they didn't do what they needed to do to be able to pay for that full, that full boat, which, by the way, can be anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000, even at a state school, right? And so we look at, them blaming themselves for not being disciplined enough, of not making sure that they had enough. And we really want to, with Pathways, with College Bound Citizens, really wrap our arms around them and say that we're here to help. Again, this is not intuitive. This is not anything that anybody goes through on a frequent basis, and it's so confusing. So we want to make sure, that we're here to help them and make those educated choices along the way.
Right. Well, when we said earlier that it's a complex and complicated process, it's also highly emotional, and you just laid that out really nicely. Let's talk about how the program works in practice. I know that Citizens originally launched a program called College Bound Citizens to help families understand how to apply for financial aid, and then in 2020, Citizens and EverFi partnered up to launch Pathways. Can you talk about some of the aims of Pathways and also about its implementation?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And I think you just hit on it, and we've talked about this. This is an incredibly confusing process. This is not, I have families that will ask, like, what is the FAFSA? Do I need to complete it? And okay, so then I got the FAFSA. What next? So we've really assembled a team of experts. And I look at my team. Many of my team has actually worked in financial aid offices. So we were able to take that knowledge and be able to really create something that helps these families understand the FAFSA process, how to access loans, grants, work study, really anything to be able to help finance college. But really, we wanted to make sure that there was an objective that they were looking at the right college for them, both academically and financially. We know so many families, again, we talked about that emotion. Student gets admitted, my son gets admitted into a college that is an absolute stretch for him, absolutely incredible, but financially may not be something that we could be able to do. So we want to make sure that students understand the cost of higher education and then what they're looking at after to make sure that that major will support that. So all of these, parts of the equation, making sure that you're understanding what you're taking out, understanding what you're going to have after you graduate. And we have a recent study that about 1,500 graduate students, 65% of them did not know what they borrowed for college. And I think maybe that might be surprising to some. That seems actually probably right on par with my experience of spending 8 years in a financial aid office. We would try to educate students, but they didn't always understand what those, what that amount looked like. They just took the loan, I need to get through college, and then they didn't really understand the payments. So 50% of respondents said they might have chosen a different school if they would have had different information, right? So we want to make sure that they are having, all of the information that they need. We don't want them to be overburdened with debt, but we know that a college degree is a great opportunity for so many. And so we want to make sure that everybody's making the smart choices with that, and that's what Pathways gives them the opportunity to do.
Right. Well, it's clear that the objectives are really noble, and you're trying to provide real important and actionable information that people will need to actually pay for college and have decisions that they're happy about over the long term of their life. And so, given those objectives, Can you talk about how you have translated, those into resources and instructions that help students and families learn what they need to know?
Absolutely, Chris. So as you mentioned, in 2020, Citizens and EverFi launched our Pathways Financing Higher Education program. It was really the first of its kind of a financial education course that empowered students to understand the financial decisions that they were making. So we took all of the education that our team had. Citizens worked with EverFi to create digital courses and resources that engage students and made financial education less daunting. While developing the courses with EverFi, there were 4 key pillars that we wanted to make sure when we were creating and designing the program. So we wanted to make sure that it was a modern experience, certainly appealing to the Gen Z who have short, digestible content, and making sure that we were, meeting them with where they were at. Simulation-based learning, using realistic scenarios to allow learners to be proactive with their new skills. Positively framed lessons begin with the foundational knowledge to meet the learners where they are at, and then commitment to accessibility. We wanted to embrace diversity. That was really important to us, and take into account multiple learner perspectives. So we found that these digital courses really fit within the school curriculum and develop strong money management skills. It's a self-graded lesson for the students, so they really get those real-world scenarios and understand all the scenarios to talk about, as Dan mentioned, with that behavioral change. We want to make sure that they have that information and knowledge to make that behavioral change. And another aspect of the program is that we host school events throughout the year with our Citizens colleagues, and they have the opportunity to engage directly with the students. And I'll tell you, Chris, this is one of my favorite things to do, especially with my team. It's a great opportunity to be able to get students to have Q&A with me and my team. And really being able to share experiences with the device with students. So it's so meaningful to be able to go out there and be able to have these conversations with students. And I think we've had just such great success with it. Again, it's one of my favorite events. And so I really think that it's been a great partnership with EverFi in doing that.
Oh, that's great. Well, so we're going to loop back to what we began talking with Dan about, and that's impact. And I would love to learn a little bit more about the results that you've seen from Pathways. What kind of, you were just talking about the impact that, you see in having these great engagements. What do the numbers and data tell you about the impact?
Right. So we've actually, in the 2020-2021 academic year, we reached over 17,000 students, which is absolutely incredible. We started with none, obviously, and, in a pandemic, created this content and really having a tremendous amount of students that were touched with that. So Citizens student assessment scores actually increased by 69%. After the course, students felt that they understood that paying for college was a really good investment, and fewer of them felt that they were intimidated by the process, which was incredible. We want to make sure that students have that access, and being intimidated or being nervous about it definitely prohibits them from doing that. So absolutely incredible. Students felt like they had more knowledge on how to complete the FAFSA, understanding loan offers, understanding their financial aid packages, and how to pay for college. And 77% of the students sponsored by Citizens are considering a 2-year or 4-year college after high school. So absolutely amazing results and just an incredible impact for these students.
Great. Well, that really underlines where we started and really illustrates the kind of impact these efforts can make. So that's terrific. Now, I want to use the rest of our time here to go through some questions from the audience, and I'm going to start with Reza. When I introduced you, your bio makes it very clear that you have devoted your career to community engagement and improvement. And I kind of want to get you to, this question is about, what the future goals for youth financial literacy are at Citizens, and how that really fits into the overall community engagement efforts that you've been so involved with.
That's a great question. In terms of what we're planning for the future of our youth financial empowerment program, that's one of the pillars of our programs, and we'll continue to serve in that fashion. Our objective is to make sure that the program remains relevant, provides high quality information to students, and we will continue to deliver those through partnerships with organizations like EverFi, Junior Achievement, and our local schools in our market. We also have a great opportunity to reach even more young people with this vital information as we expand into new markets.
Great. Well, now I have a question for Mindy. And that is, can you talk about the Citizen Scholarship Program and how it will help students pay for college?
Absolutely. I could talk about the Citizen Scholarship Program for all day if you'd like. No. Our scholarship program. So each month we give $2,500 away to students who apply through our scholarship program. There are no essays. There are no qualifications other than applying. We do have as well, parents can submit on behalf of their student. If you have an aunt or uncle or grandparent that would like to submit on your behalf as well, we have that opportunity to do so. So we see, tens of thousands of entrants each year. Absolutely been a tremendous, asset to being able to help students pay for college. In addition to the $2,500 monthly, we also have a minority scholarship that we give $2,500 on a quarterly basis. So that's an additional entry that we have an opportunity to do. And then we have the big dog prize of $15,000 annually. So we give that to a recipient who has applied for the scholarship July to July. And so we have an opportunity to give them $15,000. And that is my favorite scholarship because it obviously has just life-changing impacts to families. We gave away our first one last year, and the recipient actually didn't believe that she got the scholarship. We had to convince her that she won because of so much concern around fraud. But when she found out, her and her father were over the moon excited. So absolutely love the scholarship. You can register at citizensbank.com/scholarship to be able to enter to win.
Yeah, well, that's a nice kind of surprise to get, no doubt. Well, Dan, the final question is for you, and this is one about what the research says about the need for financial literacy education to be continuous rather than just something students are exposed to from time to time, because I think it's probably the case often when, there are drips and drabs of, hey, here's here's how you budget, or here's how you save, or here's how you think about credit or debt or whatever, but it's just not a consistent theme. What's the research say about the value of continuity?
Excellent question. And it's weird because this is one of those topics in school where we just expect that one time or two times if we bring this up, that should last you for your entire life, right? We have all these programs in elementary school that's these are what coins are, isn't money fun? And then right before you graduate, there's, oh no, here's how you do taxes and apply for college, and good luck out there. I hope everything goes okay for you. We don't teach any other subject like that. We don't teach math in a 2 to 3 hour intervention and then expect that to consistently change their attitudes and behaviors for the rest of their lives. If we want to see, as a developmental psychologist, when I want to see long-term impactful change, I want that the interventions to be 3 things. I want them to start early, right? You have to begin with a foundation and build on that. That's what we do with every other subject that we have in school, especially the ones that we think are the most important for individuals. You start early, build a foundation, and then add concepts and complexity on top of that. You make sure that it's engaging, and that means that it is exciting, that it is relevant, and that it is adaptable for every type of student so that they can take it at their own pace. Exactly what we do with every other subject as well. And then finally, that it's continuous and developmentally appropriate, right? That it, as I said before, it builds, but it keeps going. We keep reinforcing earlier messages while adding on to those, like math, right? Here's an easy concept. This is addition. All right. Here's multiple additions, also known as multiplication. Here's algebra, and we'll keep going from there, but we will consistently provide this message that reinforces past lessons and then brings in new concepts that are more relevant for the individual. Many kindergartners are not going to pick up a lot in terms of retirement plan or leasing a car. Many middle schoolers are not going to learn a lot or retain a lot in terms of planning to mortgage or refinance their homes. These things will be valuable in the future, but they need to be started early and then continuously built upon in a developmentally appropriate way. And we see in the research that when that's done, the results are much stronger and last much longer.
Right. Well, speaking as an adult, I can say that certainly continuous learning is necessary when it comes to financial literacy. It's not something that ends, but having that foundation to build on is clearly a big benefit. So thanks for that answer. And that's all the time we have today. Thanks again to our speakers and to all of you who joined us for this really interesting conversation. As a reminder, today's presentation will be available on demand, and a link will be sent to you after the webinar. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.